Please write clearly so we can read your handwriting, says the person with the worst handwriting ever. Underneath here is a bunch of stuff, we'll pull it up, about things that are happening. Please turn off your cell phones. The library door is locked, so you have to leave through this door and that door when you go, and the bathrooms are around the back. We have some information on the back table. It's kind of some newspaper clippings. We got some of the rallies were covered, just some general information. Now, the people who are going to speak have information to pass out as well. Just to let you know who we are, the Fidalgo Democrats are an independent democratic association with a focus on education. I'd like to remind people that we are not a PAC. We cannot endorse candidates or contribute to their campaigns. We do, however, invite Democratic candidates to talk about issues and legislation. If you want to contribute to the candidate's campaign, we really encourage you to do that. And they all have great, easy websites to get money. At some point, we may pass the hat. We don't charge dues. The meetings are free. What we do with the money is we've given money to the Southern Poverty Law Center, the World Central Kitchen, and we do the brick dinner at the Presbyterian Church every few months. So, and I want to thank Colton Hong, who is recording our meeting, and it will be available on our YouTube channel. Thank you. We are very, very pleased. And Rita Sullivan will work with Colton to send it out. And he is a high school student, and he's helping us with the video, and he also, what happened? There was a thing about all the demonstrations. John Johnson took some pictures, and Colton put it on whatever it's called, so we can see it. So thank you. He's also joined the steering committee. As we're talking about the John Jansen's pictures, just to let you know, every Sunday from 12 to 1, and every Wednesday now from 12 to 1, we're meeting in front of Safeway with signs. On Sunday, you have the Trump people. On Wednesday, we haven't had them yet. But we're not a secret organization, so. Our next meeting is going to be April 8th, which will be on a Tuesday. And we have invited a couple of speakers to talk about the migrant issues and farm workers. So that's another interesting topic. And I'm going to make a couple of announcements, and then before I introduce the speakers, I'd like to ask if there are any elected officials. I know there's a couple in the back. Warren is on the board of the hospital. Thank you for doing that job. And school board. Yeah. Okay, so that's Heather Brennan. Sorry.
You went over here.
Got lost. Anybody else?
Wave your hand.
Yes, she got me already.
Oh, she did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for coming. Really appreciate it. I'd like to thank Don Ambrose, who edits the Skagit Democrats newsletter. If anybody wants it, go on their website. It's a great newsletter. It's got tons of information about what's going on. There's also a Whidbey Island newsletter that Carol and Rich Tamler do, so if you're down in that area and you want to do that, that's great. There's a lot to talk about, so I'm going to try to go through it quickly, and then other people will add. I mean, there's so much going on tonight. There's a meeting online hosted by the Federal Unionist Network to talk about labor issues and how we can do things with the labor movement. So, I mean, every night there seems to be something wonderful happening. So, don't make yourself totally nuts. On Saturday, there's going to be a postcard campaign. So they're asking people to send postcards to the president at the White House, and you can say whatever you want.
Just don't address it to the president. Address
Yeah,
it to
right.
Trump.
Yeah, exactly. Don't sign your name and address it. They come to your front door. Cascadia Daily News is having a meet and greet on Tuesday, March 18th from 1 to 3, and it'll be at the library here. And they're going to be talking about what they do and their political activism as a newspaper. What's that? That's the Cascadia. And when we pull the screen up, I wrote it all on the board, but, and then I'm going to have, in a few minutes, okay, this is Bellingham Indivisible, also has a newsletter. There's also a Skagit Indivisible. Again, you can get on their websites and get on their lists. Indivisible and Skagit Democrats. So if you want more information, that's that. And later, Kathy Berg is going to talk about Skagit Citizens for Democracy. They have a meeting next week on Friday at the library. There's handouts in the back, and that way you know what's happening, and she can pass out stuff as well. So, the other thing that's come up is, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, Momad Khalil, the man who, Mahmoud Khalil, who was taken in New York and is now in down in Louisiana. And so there's a lot of movement going on about him and how he was basically taken out of his home, even though he's here illegally. So again, if that's something that's important to you, the ACLU is one of the groups that is defending him. I read this last time. I'm going to read it again before we go on. It's by a man named Martin Maimuller. He's German. First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. Okay, moving on. ICE. We'll talk about more about that next month with the migrant people about what we can do. There's a phone number that you can call if you see something and you don't want to interrupt, but you can get their vehicle number, the name of the vehicle, and you can ask for the location and the name of the person that's doing that. Another person that's doing stuff is Heather Cox Richardson, and she has a daily newsletter that comes out, and she talks about recent stuff and as well as history. And
Robert Hubble.
What's that?
Robert Hubble.
Robert Hubble. There's just so many wonderful people doing things, and I just encourage you to pick and choose the ones that you find interesting and in the areas of your interest. Okay. We have a couple of people that before we introduce Tony and Dean, we're going to have, I'm going to pronounce your name wrong. Melillo? Close enough? Dean Shelton are here to talk in a little while. But I'd like to introduce Elise Cutter and Elise.
Oh. It's okay.
I am bad tonight. You guys need to correct me. Thank you. Sometimes my brain and my mouth are not connected. And Laura Maroney. She's not.
Meredith Stroman's here.
Oh, hi, Meredith. Hi. Okay, so they're going to talk about quickly about the upcoming hospital levy, which we're going to vote on April 22nd. And I hope if people want more information, they can call. And I hope all of you will, I'll make a plug to vote yes.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm Elise Cutter. I'm the CEO at Island Health, and I answer to Elsie because the first day of school, every year of my entire life, I got called Elsie. So I do answer to it, so it's okay. It's not a problem. I significantly underestimated the number of people here, so I do have some handouts that I'll pass around. This handout was also in the Heartbeats magazine, if you received that at your home. So I'm just going to kind of pass these around. I'm going to steal one for myself to talk from it, and then just kind of pass them around. Thank you so much. So we are going out for an increase in our maintenance and operations levy in April. The ballots will drop on April 2nd, and election day is April 22nd. We are the only thing on the ballot, so you will just see us on there. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about Island Health and a little bit about why we're going out to ask for an increase in our levy. So we are a public hospital district. So back in 1957, 3 amazing women went door to door and encouraged people in this community to secure health care here on Fidalgo Island. And the community overwhelmingly voted yes and stood up Island Health in 1962. Since then, we have grown well beyond a hospital, and we serve about 46,000 people a year. So obviously from this community and surrounding communities, we deliver about 450 babies a year. We have about 18,000 emergency room visits, 3,000 inpatients, 5,000 surgeries. I can go on and on. I'm a numbers person. But we serve a lot of people in this community. June knows. So we serve a lot of folks in this community, and we do that because we have 740 amazing employees at Island Health. And they are dedicated, and they are there when we all need them. And because of them, Island Health has been given for 3 years in a row Medicare's 5-star award, which is your highest level you can get. And it's based on 46 quality measures around clinical outcomes, having good clinical outcomes, and high patient satisfaction or patient experience. So that puts us in the top 8% of hospitals in the nation. So and that is due to the dedicated people that work there. And we are so proud of that because it means we are here for all of you when you need us. I take my family there too. But what we're struggling with is post-COVID, like all of us, we have seen extreme increases in the cost to do anything. And one of the other fun facts for Island Health, the people that we serve, for the most part, are insured by a government payer, meaning Medicare, Medicaid, or TRICARE, which is the military insurance. That constitutes 78% of the patients that come through our doors. So we are there to serve anybody who comes through our doors, regardless of ability to pay or what insurance they have, because we're a public hospital district, right? We're here to serve this community. So what that means for us, though, is we've seen an over 20% increase in the cost to deliver care. We have received no increase in those government payments. So we have this delta now between what it costs us to provide care and what we are paid to provide that care. So the reason we're going out for a levy, our maintenance and operations levy is used for 3 things. It is used for equipment, technology, and facilities. That's it. It doesn't go to salaries. It's not going to my salary. It's not going to staff salaries. It is for equipment, technology, and facilities. And what we know is in healthcare, things are changing so fast, especially when it comes to technology. And we have to make sure we keep all of our equipment up to date, or you won't want to come there. You're not going to want to come and get an x-ray on an old x-ray machine, right? You're going to go somewhere else. You don't want to come get a mammogram on an old 2D mammogram, right? That's why we keep up to date. We have a 3D mammogram. We make sure that we have the clearest x-ray pictures we can possibly get. So all those things are exceedingly more and more expensive. The other fun fact for us is that levy, and you may or may not know this, we can only increase it 1% a year unless we go out to a vote, which is what we're asking to do. So that levy for us each year is $3.4 million, which means we can only increase it $34,000 a year. That's the only increase that comes to the hospital for taxes. So I don't know if any of you are current or former healthcare workers in any way, but there is nothing we can buy in healthcare worth $34,000. So, I mean, it's not even an IV pump, okay? So that's where we struggle, is we've had to continually dip into our savings and our operating cash to try to keep up. And if you've been to the hospital lately, we've been working really hard to update the facility, make sure our equipment is up to date, and make sure that we have the services there that you all need. So we've been working on improving services, improving the facility, updating equipment, but we can see we're hitting a point where we need some extra help from this community to remain current and remain viable, because we want to continue to provide 5-star care. We want to continue, I want to be up here next year and say we are still in the top 8% of hospitals in the nation right here on Little Fidalgo Island. So on April 22nd is the day folks that live in our district, so that's Fidalgo Island, Weemis, Sinclair, and Cypress. Those are the residents that get to vote on this levy lift. So we are asking folks to please vote and to think about Island Health and the services that we provide and how important we are to the community, not only for healthcare, but also as an economic driver here, employing 740 folks. So, thank you. That was a really quick version. I did like a 40-minute presentation today at the Chamber of Commerce, so that was short.
We're not going to take a lot of questions because we have a lot to cover tonight. So if you have questions, call. Sorry.
On here, if you do have questions on this handout, also as a QR code, or you can go to our website. We have a whole page dedicated to the levy, and we have a lot of information in there. If you want to get into the numbers and the levy amounts and the millage rates and all that fun stuff, we have it. But basically, for an average home here in Anacortes, we are asking for 89 cents a day more, which equates to about $326 a year more. That's what we're talking about. And Meredith Stoneman is also here. She is from the Vote Yes for Island Health Committee and just has some information for you as well. But you can go to our website for more detail.
Yeah, quick.
1 minute, Ross.
No, you're great. Thank you.
I just wanted to bring to your attention some ways you can get involved to support this. If you are a business owner and you have a storefront, we have a bunch of these signs. If you are a business owner and you have a public board, like they do in the library, you can post this sign. If you would like a yard sign, I have a bunch of yard signs back there. Yes. And if you do sign up for a yard sign, we will pick them up after the levy. So we just ask that you, when you take one, you put your name and address on there so we know where to pick them up. We also, when she was saying call, you can. If you take this card, it will give you all the information you need to go to the website, direct you directly to how to get involved. And then secondly, what I did forget to say today at the chamber was if you see posts supporting the levy and you support the levy, feel free to share them on social media. You know, but just pump it out there. Pump it out to your friends, pump it out to the public. Thank you.
So there's signs, if you have a good place to put them out, that would be wonderful. And, you know, the website is really the best way. So,
Barbara?
yeah.
I'm not a plant, but I have a, I just have to make this comment. I picked up one of these brochures and I have to open it up. And so on this page, 2 of the excellent professionals, the nurses who helped my partner Laura involved in a serious car
I
crash
have
on
a
Monday.
house on Campbell Lake
And
Road
spent 2 days
that
and 2
has
nights in
all
the
the traffic
hospital.
from Skyline
And
going
here
by.
are 2 of the
Hey,
heroes
I can
that
give you
helped her
money.
through that. She's back home now
Yeah,
and is
okay,
doing
so-
okay, but I just wanted to point that out. There they were,
I can
right
take the
there.
sign down.
These are my heroes, so.
How much is it? Oh,
Okay,
wait, finally, there we go.
there's one more person that I'm going to have talk for a couple of minutes. She is Kathy Berg, who's been very active throughout many, many years. I've known her when we were involved with school issues. And it seems to, life seems to repeat itself, unfortunately or unfortunately. And so she is, has a group called Skagit Citizens for Democracy. and they're meeting next week. So if you want to just talk for a couple of minutes, and
Thank you so much.
Well,
I usually put up, well, I have one of those
I
already
got
in the
involved
post.
in this
Put
group
That's for
sort
the
of
Kamala Harris I
accidentally.
was. And before that, the TJs. Well, I just wanted to say, I know you're not the head of the hospital. I'll tell her I go to
Okay.
the walk-in.
Anyway,
clinic.
on inauguration day,
I have,
I got online Facebook and found a group of people that I've been communicating with through Bellingham and Seattle. I don't know if you're familiar with Red, Wine, and Blue, women that have gotten together to try to counter all of the Trump agenda and inform people of what's going on with Project 25. Well, I haven't been able to go to Seattle that often or to Bellingham, and I found on the Facebook group that there is a Skagit County Sweep Group. Skagit County Sweep Group is actually part of Red, Wine, and Blue, but it's there, they are on Facebook under Sweep or Good Trouble Nation. So I started communicating with these ladies thinking, okay, well, this is great. Maybe I can start getting involved locally.
Gotta hold it close.
I don't want to eat it.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so anyway, as it turned out, we wanted to go and meet somewhere and get talking about starting a local group where we could get involved. I thought maybe this would be about 10 or 15 people. Well, I started getting emails. I made the arrangements so that we could meet here at the library, and we had our first meeting on the 21st of February, and we had 39 people in attendance. That number has grown to over 60 now of people that I email out to. And on our first meeting, we decided that we weren't going to start a Skagit County sweep group of our own. We were going to start the group where we felt we were Skagit citizens for democracy. And our plan is to work with the local groups that are doing a great job, like Indivisible Skagit, and in the Skagit County Democrats, and the Fidalgo Democrats, of which I do know, Barbara, because we had to fight the issue in our public schools back in the late 80s when the far right was saying we were teaching satanic and witchcraft with our reading series. And we had 5 of us that were working at that time to prevent them from being on our school boards. So anyway, this group got started, and most of us are baby boomers, and we're trying to figure out why 90 million or 36% of eligible voters did not vote. And when you take I don't know the exact numbers, but if you take the 36% that did not vote, the 31% that voted for, or the 30% that voted for Harris, and the 1 point something that voted for third party, and you add those all up, they're like something like 68% that did not vote for Trump's agenda, because he got 31% of the vote. So he did not win a mandate. So we're trying to figure out how to get the young people involved and get them voting. We're trying to figure out where we can work the best in our community to prevent this from impacting our schools, our communities, our city government, and our state government, and wherever else we need it. Like I said, we've only had our first meeting. We had a speaker that was going to come from Invisible Skagit, Christine Kronberg, but she got the flu, so I got to stand up and talk, which I had not planned on being a leader to the group. But so far I am sending out emails to over 60 people and keeping people informed right now. At our next meeting, we're going to have, it's going to be on Friday, March the 21st, and we have a guest speaker, Christy Stewart-Stein. And she's going to come talk to us about how to talk to a Trump voter without cowering or arguing. Okay. Okay. So I understand that I got to move along a little bit here. That's okay. So we had a really great meeting. Everybody's pumped and wants to get together again. We've started a Discord group online through one of our attendees who works with the biology and marine in the area, and she's getting us all signed up for that so we can stay in communication. We don't want to be on Facebook very much anymore. I don't know if Barbara mentioned this, but we do have a town hall coming up on Saturday at the Mount Vernon Library. You did? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Okay, so on Saturday, March the 15th, from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. at the Mount Vernon Library Commons Building, we'll have Senator Liz Lovett, Representative Deborah Lankinoff, and Representative Alex Ramel. So if you are able to go over there, I would suggest that you go early, because you might not be able to get into the community room unless you go early. I understand most of these town halls are packed. They're in the main rooms, they're in the outside rooms and outside. So if you're gonna go early. And I welcome you to come to our next meeting. I do have a handout sheet on the back there by the sign-up sheets that gives you information. If you would like to be on our mailing list for emails, I ask that you send me an email to my email address, because I found myself trying to decipher people's addresses last time. I did pretty good. I think I only had 2 out of the 60 that I haven't been able to get through to yet. Okay, so thank you very much, and I hope to see you at our next meeting here at the library.
As you can see, there's a lot going on. Talking about best handwritings, these are a few of the things that are happening in this area. So it's just a really interesting and busy time. You're always welcome to contact me if you have any questions. And now, finally, our very patient speakers are here. Thank you. And they're going to come up, and we're going to be talking about local, state, and national issues and concerns. How are the unions and the labor movement supporting workers? And what can we do to help in these challenging times? I like that word. So I'm going to have them come up. I apologize, I don't have the cards for you today. And I'll give you this microphone and then
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Talking and moving is not my strong point. Let me just get settled here. My name is Tony Melillo. I am a firefighter, and I work just on the south end of Bellingham. I work for a small department called South Wacom Fire Authority. Just to give you a little bit of context of why I'm here, that puts me as a union firefighter for Local 106, which covers the majority of the firefighters up there in Whatcom County. I became a delegate to our Central Labor Council, which covers Whatcom, Skagit, and Island County about 8 or 9 years ago, and here I recently ran for president, and I'm now the president of that council. So that gives you a little bit of backstory of where I'm coming from, and one of the things that I found the most interesting in this position is having conversations with groups like yours. A lot of what I think the spirit of when I was talking with Barbara about the questions that have come from this group about labor is what we're also working on at the Central Labor Council, at least my Central Labor Council, is building networks and community. The relationships that we have with some of the other groups are not just the Democratic groups, but also the food justice workers, talking to the houses of labor that aren't affiliated with the Central Labor Councils, talking to workers who are not organized at all. I'm sure many of you know, and if you don't, Western Washington University is the home of nearly 2,000 newly organized student workers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they organized, definitely. They organized under UAW, United Auto Workers, and they're still fighting a year later to be recognized by Western Washington University to get their first contract, if you can believe that. But I say this just as a little bit of context because a lot of the questions that I get is what is labor doing and what can different groups help with? And the first thing for me is understand some of these stories and know that it's not just about the national stage for us, it's about the eyeball-to-eyeball conversations and continuing to keep that community going and the networks, knowing the people in this room, but also knowing the people that are around. Heard a lot of great names like Indivisible Skagit, Indivisible Bellingham, the different Democratic groups, and all of your labor groups. For me, I'm going to continue going out to things like this and building that network. I think that's really important. But I'll stop there and take a look at my notes and pass off to Dean.
Well, unlike somebody, I can't sit very well. So my name is Dean Shelton. I actually am a resident here in Anacortes. Lifelong Skagit County resident, new to Anacortes over the last 3 years. Tony asked me to come tonight and join him. Although we work very much hand in hand, I have some different positions. So currently, my positions right now that I hold, I'm the vice president for the Washington State Council of Firefighters. This is the union that represents over 9,000 union firefighters in the state of Washington. It is the largest firefighter union parent organization in the state. We represent pretty much east, west, north, and south. We represent both public and private. Some people wouldn't recognize that or know that. We also represent federal firefighters as well. The International Association of Firefighters is the parent union that Tony and I belong to. It's over 350,000 members of both the United States and Canada. And so we have a pretty broad group that we represent. The other position that I also hold is that I also am a vice president at large for the Washington State Labor Council. The Washington State Labor Council represents over 650,000 union members. I'm one of 30, I think 7, it keeps changing, one of 37 or one of 38 vice presidents on that organization representing workers throughout the United States. One of the things that Tony and I talked about briefly before I came in though, just to let you know, for the first time in over 80 years, union density has dropped below 10%. As of January, there's now over 91% of all workers that are not organized. And so that brings a unique challenge for us. And it's a good challenge, to be quite honest with you. Tony, I'm sure we'll talk more as we go. Obviously, I have a relationship. Rich and I go way back. Rita and I go way back. I've been representing firefighters for over 28 years, but not just firefighters. That's part of the reason why I took the position with the State Labor Council, is that I am more involved. I do work with other unions. I do try to find worker actions and engage ourselves. I think it's important as firefighters that as members of our community and people that represent our community, just to be honest too, is that Tony and I both, we're different than some unions in that we aren't staff. We don't just work for the union. We actually are active firefighters. In fact, up until January 21st, I retired in January. So I actually have that retirement card now. But we actually work full-time as career firefighters, and then we do the union work in addition to that work. So it's a little different than some trade unions that we're kind of wearing multiple hats there and representing, which also gives us a good pulse on our communities, right? We know what's going on in our communities. We know the concerns that our communities have. We see the issues that are going on in our communities, where they need improvement, where we can make changes, where we can help make those changes. And some of those things include actually, obviously lifting all boats and trying to find ways that workers like us who enjoy pensions, health care, livable wages, and those things also are spread across the board so that all workers have those same things that are priorities for us. When we talk about housing issues within our community, when we talk about the fentanyl issue, which seems to be a big Republican talking point these days, look, we're all concerned about drug addiction and the use of drugs in our communities and the negative effects that they can have on our communities. We all know there's an issue. We also can go all the way back to the OxyContin crisis, which is what started this issue, and we can talk about the white-collar crime that created what we have today, which is the fentanyl crisis. Not all fentanyl comes up from the southwest border, and in fact, actually, that's another narrative that people are using, and in fact, you know what, we can keep going on and on and on about all those things that I'm sure most in this room are very well aware of, but our communities are not. And so finding avenues that we can communicate and talk about those issues and to have reasonable discussion is really where we have to be. A couple years ago, I have a friend that's he's a professor at the University of Nebraska. His name's John Kretschmar. You know, one thing that I've been working hard on is that what he always said is the first meeting is where you either make or break, and the key will be getting to the second meeting. So when we have conversations about trade unions, yeah, I'll be honest with you, our group is probably split 50-50, right? We're probably right now, when you look at most trade unions, they're probably literally right around that 52% Democrat and probably that 48% Republican. It just depends on where you're at in the country. It could be plus or minus the opposite. So we have to find ways that we can communicate how we are able to do those things we do. Collective bargaining, right, should be something that is not for some, it should be for all. And when we look across the 50 states in this country, collective bargaining shouldn't be a privilege. It should be the right of all workers to have the right to collectively bargain in their workplace, to bargain those things that actually have impacts on them. In this state, under RCW 4156, we have the ability to bargain wages, hours, and working conditions are all working conditions. So that means safety, right? Which should be a very, very key issue as we start going into this Trump administration, because we know what's going to happen is that they're going to start changing and deregulating things to where people and workers are going to be more in jeopardy. They aren't going to want to cover them when they are hurt, injured, or killed. And those are things that we're concerned about as unions. So for me, I travel all over the country working for the International Association of Firefighters. I just got back from a pretty amazing program back east. I will tell you that right now, some of the greatest economists and trade unionists and authors are not super optimistic about this first 6 months of the Trump administration, but yet this is what we're faced with. And so for me, like, this is an opportunity. You know, this is our opportunity. And I think, you know, when I see these names up on the board and when I look in this room, you know, the fact that on a Thursday night there's 30 plus people in this room that are concerned about their community, I think that says a lot of good things. One thing that we're going to have to work on, this is my project for the program that I just graduated from, is trying to find those young workers and engage them. We have a young workforce right now that is union curious, and we have to find a way to get them to continue that curiosity into a movement. And that movement actually can be contagious, and it's going to take people like myself, and Rich, and Tony, and everybody else in this room to really encourage young workers to rise up, because if they want the power, they can have the power. As she said earlier about the voters, right, that's a huge issue. When 41 million people didn't vote in the election, that should tell us something about what we're doing. And as Democrats, we really have to examine where we were in this last election and why we failed to take out a guy that we already knew was bad, that we already saw his playbook, that we already saw what his intentions were going to be, and they're coming to fruition today. I could keep going, but I'm going to turn it back over to Tony because I'm not sure how much time we have, but that's my spiel. Thank you.
You have the rest of the doing.
No.
Well, anyway, thank you. It's wonderful. It's really, and I really appreciate you being here. So.
Yeah, our pleasure. There was a couple of realities that I think Dean pointed out that I want to expand on. For my membership, there's 314 firefighters that my local represents up there in Whatcom County. And I get less than 50 showing up to a meeting. I get maybe a third of those voting on our issues. I don't get anybody out door knocking, hardly at all. I beat the band to get 10 or more people out there to knock on doors for politicians. And so I'm struggling to figure out how do we make alignment with those things again also. And one of the things that Dean talked about there is the engagement with the younger groups. I've got about 10 more years left before I retire. So while I'm not quite the old guy on the job yet, I'm looking like I'm closer to the end than I am the beginning. I've got a lot of people behind me. How do I inspire them to come and be part of something like this? How do I inspire them to get to their Central Labor Council meeting? How do I inspire them to do something other than just be a dues-paying member? The national thing that I'm encouraged by, there's a saying that I keep going back to, at least I think it's a saying, that says, tough times make strong people make easy times make weak people, and weak people make hard times. I'm not saying that anybody in this room is weak, but at that labor density that Dean is talking about, I'm encouraged when I see 14 workers of Evolve Chocolate up there in Bellingham, if you ever go to Village Books. They're not part of a union. The manager fired one of their dishwashers because he called in sick, and the 14 of them had enough and they walked out. And then they contacted the International Workers of the World, the IWW, because somebody happened to know somebody and said, we're not sure exactly how to do this. Well, you're doing the right thing because you shut down the business and you took your power. You withheld your work. So it's stories like those and those 2,000 student workers and that younger group, anything that we can do to engage them in those types of conversations and those actions and show them. I think 7 out of the 9 Starbucks up in my neck of the woods are unionized now, right? Are we going into places that are not unionized and having those conversations with folks? You all have family that live in the area. Are we having conversations with them, actively working on the job? Are you engaged politically? Are you engaged with your union? Those are kind of big things. It's difficult for me when it comes to endorsements also. This is another truth that I'm struggling to figure out an answer to, where there's some very good social justice issues out there that I think labor can get behind, absolutely. But when we go to discuss our endorsements with some of the politicians that come from the Democratic side, I used to categorize this as a spectrum, and I felt in my short time in politics now that the spectrum between left and right was just growing. There's farther right now and there's farther left now. And somebody with much more experience pointed out to me, also you need to consider that maybe there's a shift to the right as a country. Maybe the spectrum hasn't changed much, but what was a liberal value in the 80s might be more of a conservative value now. Like those politicians that we considered Republicans in the 80s, were they more midstream to today's politics? I don't know. But I highlight that because when I go to try to talk to membership about endorsing a candidate, and they don't want to vote to endorse that candidate because they're not even making ends meet. It's difficult for, I'll give you a quick story. SEIU 1199 and the Washington State Nurses Association and the United Association of Physicians and Dentists, 3 locals that represent the majority of the workers up there at St. Joe's Peace Health. They've taken up a food collection on the hospital campus there because there's a large portion of the SEIU members who are on food stamps and they cannot make ends meet. So when I'm talking to union members and I'm saying we need to vote our paycheck, and they're going, I love these social justice issues, but this person is not talking at all about my labor issues. They're not they're not at the rally. They're not here when I'm trying to fight the hospital district. They're not here when I'm, and those types of things. And then you start to hear this rhetoric of inflation and all the stuff we're hearing, through the corporation-run media. And that's the narrative that some of these young folks are hearing. And it really disturbs me when I look at that and I say, well, labor typically leans towards Democrat, but when I've got folks going, I need to vote my personal values, I need to vote for what I think is gonna help me out personally, and they don't see the forest for the trees there, that's one of the fights that we're fighting. And I think it would be helpful that when politicians come from this type of group, and you come to get our endorsement and you come to talk to labor groups, I think it's important to understand one of the things that Dean said, a lot of us are fighting this on top of regular life. I'm here not at my son's hockey game right now, right? I'm not saying that to be a martyr, but this is not my full-time job. So when you engage with labor, just understand that a lot of us are fighting this on top of our regular jobs. Then, from there, with those politicians, are they showing up with union bugs? Everybody know what a union bug is? So whenever you look at anything that's printed by a union or created by a union, okay, there's what we call a union bug, and it's a very small stamp somewhere on the page or on a card, and it shows that this was made by union labor, okay? If we want to see working families continue to have jobs in the local area, we have to have the industry and the jobs. We have to build those industries here locally. We have to continue to do that. We're fighting a fight right now up in Whatcom County to potentially get Alcoa and Telco back up and running. Okay, that's close to 1,000 jobs up there. But we're gonna have some fights with environmentalists, right? Politician comes in and you have some social justice issues, you have some environmental issues, you have some labor issues, and you put down a page in front of us that doesn't have a union bug and you don't really know some of the issues that we're facing. Me personally, I don't close the door on that. That's an opportunity for me to educate. But I'm saying this in front of this group because this is an opportunity for this group to know that when you put a candidate forward or we have conversations with candidates, you gotta carry the water. You gotta print stuff on union labor. You gotta show that you're actually doing the things that you say you're going to do. So otherwise I can't talk my membership into endorsing anything.
Yeah, and I think a couple things that Tony said there, I think it's very, very clear here. Look, one of the things that members are looking at, and obviously community members are, look, we may be unhappy with some of our electeds on the Democrat side, but obviously we're seeing what happens on the Republican side. So there's two things that gotta happen, you know, for when I start looking down the road, and you know, one is that we have to keep people accountable. Right, it's no longer acceptable that we're going to allow some of the things that we've watched happen based on incumbency. And I think those are things that are going to be challenging, right? Those are challenges for all of us. It's challenges for us in labor, but it's also challenging for us as Democrats. As someone that just came back from DC lobbying for the International Association of Firefighters, you know, again, not a lot of great answers back there. And I think right now, you know, Democrats specifically are looking for some answers from our electeds. I think we need to talk about the things that matter to most Americans, middle-class Americans, which is that our next generation, the people coming up, generational wealth is the only way they're gonna buy a home at this point, right? When the median average home price is $800,000 in King County or $850,000, the average, you know, young person trying to find an ability to get a down payment on a house is just not within reach. So how do we explain to young workers and young members, like, yeah, this is what we want to work on, livable wages, healthcare. I mean, Rich and I were just talking when he walked in, we're talking about healthcare. For those in here, you know, again, I'm not trying to pry, I've never not had healthcare. I've been fortunate that my parent, you know, middle-class family, my dad worked at the refinery and retired from the refinery. I was hired by a fire department, and I've never not known what it's like to not have healthcare. Until you actually know somebody that doesn't have healthcare and see how difficult that is, it's really hard to understand. And right now, my partner is that person. Like she has a very high deductible healthcare plan, and it's difficult. And so many people are in that boat. So we have to figure out a way that we're going to lift wages. We have to find a way that young people are going to be able to afford to live in our communities. We have to find ways that people can have healthcare and have stability, knowing that if they get sick or injured, that they have abilities to get treated and cared for. We have to find ways that they can have retirements, right? I mean, we hear this every day right now. What's the big conversation on the news probably today, tonight, and last week? Yeah, Social Security is one for sure, but the market's crashing, right? Oh, the market, look at the market's doing. Yeah, most people aren't in the market, right? Like, it's only pertaining to certain people. Yes, sir?
It's time to get into it.
It's time to get into it. Sure, you know, but if you're worried about buying a loaf of bread or buying a jar of peanut butter, you're not worried about the market. You're worried about just living to the next day. And those are things that, you know, we have to build And we have to get them so that they have stability, so that they can have a decent retirement and actually have respect in retirement. And so when I talk to groups, what I'm talking to them about is that we have to start promoting and start looking at these representatives and talking to them and what are they going to do? How are they going to stand up to these things that are happening in our country today? And this is what I told Rick Larson last week in DC. What are you doing? You know what, right now we have 150 federal firefighters in this state alone. If you look at the state of Washington and the federal installations that we have, PSNS, Whidbey, Bangor, Lewis McCord, just to name a few, and it goes on and on and on and on. There's only about 150 to 175 federal firefighters. They have different rules than what Tony and I have as public and public sector union members. Right now, there's bills that are going to strip them of their ability to unionize. One, that's the first issue. Two, there's 48 of those 150 that are on probation, and we know what happened over the last few weeks with federal probationary firefighters. And if they lay off the 46 to 48 federal firefighters, we have a whole lot of issues. That's just one sector of federal employees, though, right? Our parks are going to get hurt. All of those things that we take for granted that are federally employed are being impacted. Yes, ma'am.
What was Representative Larson's answer?
There wasn't one. Right? It was a phone, look, I'm going to be quite candid. It was a phone call. It started out as a phone call in regards to fundraising. I frankly told them that right now wasn't the time to talk about fundraising and that the time was for action. And I think that's what we all need to do. We need to insist that our electeds, you know what? It's not that we're trying to beat them up. We know that they have a hard job right now. We know that right now everybody is struggling, but it doesn't mean the work stops. My work's not stopping. As a union member, I'm going to continue to fight and fight and fight. And as a union representative, there's no excuse for what's going on. I'm going to continue to find avenues, right? Our federal grants are frozen right now. It's just, I can only talk about my issues, and so it's not to elevate my issues versus others, but those are the ones that I'm an expert on. But those are things that are happening to all of us. The National Fire Academy, closed. FEMA, impacted, right? It's only going to take the next natural disaster. Federal wildfire firefighters right now, no hiring, freeze, right? And we know that there is no wildfire season anymore. Wildfire season is all year now because of climate. And that's just the reality. What last week? South Carolina, North Carolina? South Carolina, right? California, as we just saw with the Palisades fire and those. These are things that we have to continue to talk about and cannot just cower. We cannot hide from it. The Trump administration is going to continue to do this shock and awe, and we have to be ready for it. And it's up to our federally elected, our state elected, and our local electeds to actually take a stand, which is that, you know what, we demand better, and we want more, and we expect responses. And I think it's starting to come a little bit. We're starting to see some rallies, right? Bernie was out last week. I think 9,000 people came to a rally. You know, we can see movement coming. We can see the movement coming out, but I think it's going to be the young worker and the young persons that are already being impacted that are really going to have to rise up. Because we're all being impacted, but it's going to take everybody to get out there and really put pressure on electeds to really make the change and to force the Trump administration to really reconsider some of these things. This tit for tat thing with Canada and Mexico and European countries, it's just nothing. None of it is good for any of us. It's just not, right? It's terrible for our country. It's terrible for every worker. And whether you voted Republican or Democrat, I think everybody's starting to see what happens when you put an oligarch in office, which is that he's going to take care of himself, which his whole plan is to destroy the market, right, and then try to have control over everything that he possibly can. That's just the bottom line. Now, granted, these are my personal opinions, but I do speak this to my union. I do speak this with our different unions, obviously, within the State Labor Council. And I think it's important that we start having those conversations. I'm not going to yell at my neighbor who voted Republican, right? I sent a text message to one of my former coworkers who's retired today, and he sent me a text back that said, I said, hey, how are you doing? He goes, living the mega life. And I'm like, I spent 10 years trying to change you, and I did. What happened to you when you retired? And I reminded him that he's living on a public pension. Right, he's living on a public pension, right? He's had health care, he has access to good health care, he's got a roof over his head. And all those things didn't just come because of that guy giving it to him, I can guarantee that. It came from hard work of union members who bargained for those wages, hours, and working conditions so he could have the life he has today. He didn't like that so well, but that's the way our relationship is.
Truth hurts.
So with that, I'll turn it back over to Tony, but I'm happy to answer any questions. But I think continue to add pressure. I think phone calls are working. The last thing I'll talk about. Phone calls to your federally electeds, working. Jam their phones up, right? Just start calling. Call and call and call. Pick one issue. Find two issues, right? Hey, this is so-and-so. I'm calling Congressman Larson. These are my concerns. What's your response to this? What are you doing? I'd like a phone call back. Put it in their lap and keep calling. Do not let up. I think the pressure is going to continue on these federally electeds until they actually make action happen and they involve themselves. And that's what I'm doing. It's just one example. And then I'll turn it back over to Tony.
Something that came to mind too was everybody saw what happened to public employees in Utah. So the state of Utah, if you're a public employee, you're no longer allowed to bargain with your employer. So they took away public bargaining for every public employee in Utah. Okay. The think tank that created that bill that passed is pushing that in Montana. They're pushing it in Idaho, they're pushing it in Washington, they're pushing it in Oregon. I went through, actually both Dean and I went through a leadership class. The IFF is formed into districts, and our district is the 7th district. It's Washington, Alaska, Idaho, and Montana. During that class, you go to each state's capital to learn their political process. What I got from that was being a firefighter in Washington State, and not only Washington State, but the Pacific Northwest Washington State is kind of like a cheat code. I didn't realize how absolutely lucky and sheltered I am up here in this area, comparatively to those other states and some places in our, the other part of Washington, right? So what's interesting for me when I thought about that is I go, well, I've got, as an example, City of Bellingham has 200 firefighters. Over 150 of them have less than 5 years on the job right now. Yeah, a lot of retirements, okay? And as those retirements happen, we backfill with a whole new generation of firefighters, which is great to see. Do they know what it took to get their pension? Do they know who brought them the weekend or their days off? Do they know how fragile their bargaining rights actually can be in the wrong political climate?
Yeah.
That's the stuff that I'm working on right now. Okay. So, just saying that for context because, our leadership, the vice president of that 4-state area, Ricky Walsh, he's been doing it for 30-something years. And, that's part of his message. He's like, Washington's got to wake up a little bit. Even though we are a very blue state, the same plans that took down Utah are the same plans that are eating away at Montana and Idaho. Is it Idaho that only the teachers and the firefighters have bargaining? Or is that Montana? I can't remember which.
I think Montana, and I think the teachers, I think they lost it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Our son's a firefighter in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. About a month ago, they said we're getting rid of the union there. They all headed down to Boise. They're still kind of up in the air about it. Do you know anything where they stand on that?
They said they're getting
rid of the unions and the Idaho Fire Department.
It was a bill to strip their collective bargaining rights, which in a sense is going to do the same thing. So in Utah, basically, members are probably going to opt out of their union because at this point their union can't provide what most of them would wish for, which is the ability to bargain wages, hours, and working
So what will happen then? They just a bunch of individuals.
It's exactly what the Republicans want, which is to eliminate trade unions.
Yeah, there was a fight out of California involved the Janus decision. It was decided in Supreme Court where a publicly funded teacher didn't like that his union dues were going to support candidates that he didn't specifically support, and different groups got a hold of that when it got to the Supreme Court, and it essentially rode for a while, and then it was decided. And what was interesting about it is it basically meant that there's no closed shops anymore. So there used to be this idea of, to be a firefighter as an example, you had to be part of a union. Well, the other part to that is that in a lot of unions, I can't they're the same law that protects me as a union firefighter, where you cannot discriminate because I'm part of a union, is the same one that protects the person who wants to opt out and not be a union member. So our lifeblood to be able to fight these fights is our dues paying members. My whole budget is from the paychecks of the people that are part of the union. So in that case, my union can't do anything for me, I'm gonna save the $130 a month and put it back in my pocket. You know, in Louisiana, it's illegal for firefighters to even put a political sign in their personal yard. They're not allowed to post on Facebook or any of their social medias, any of their political affiliations, otherwise they get disciplined. So I say those extremes because what is trying to have happen is encouraging people to opt out of their unions, encouraging workers to not organize, is what continues to break down the labor movement. And I'll be honest with you, if we want to see a bunch of Walmarts around here and everything made offshore, that's kind of how you do it, right? So I'm going to be done there, and I know there was some questions from the group there too.
If we have questions, I'm going to ask you to use the, state your name and use the microphone, because it's hard to hear sometimes what people are wanting to ask. So, do we have any questions?
And if they could stand up if they're able, it helps to hear.
Okay. Okay, and stand up. Okay, raise your hand and I'll bring the mic around.
Is the Labor Council going to be having activities, days of action, supporting federal workers, but also unions here?
Yeah, thank you. I think I'll answer that in two parts. The first one is that I think if this group doesn't currently have a relationship with the Snow Isle Central Labor Council, which is actually the area that you're in, by extension, my Central Labor Council up there, you don't have relationships with the food justice workers, with Starbucks Workers United, any of the locals that are around your area right now, it's time to start building some of those relationships, right? And what I classify, or what I kind of characterize the Central Labor Council is, it's like the United Nations of labor. I have 28, actually I'm up to 32 now, houses of labor that are affiliated with my Central Labor Council. And by rough count, that's well over 10,000 members in those counties, okay? That's 32 different personalities and different walks of life that come in with their issues to share. So what we started to do is to say, hey, Fidalgo Dems, if you would like to come to our meeting and we'll share solidarity stories. We'll all share the stories of what we're all doing so that you can hear what these folks are getting into, right? You can share your story. You can share about what it is that your group is working on. So I'm really wanting to see that kind of network. And then to your question about events, now we know and we're more coordinated when there's days of action, when there's rallies going on, right? When there's a fight, when there's a talk to your legislator, when there's a, whatever it is, right? An op-ed piece, But I'm still seeing that we're kind of pocketed. We're all trying to do the same thing, but we got to build that network so we're doing it together. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I just looked on the State Labor Council webpage. Obviously, they posted, there's going to be town halls. It looks like every legislator, every legislative district's holding town halls coming up over the next 2 weeks. Clearly we're in a long session. Obviously, there's a whole lot of activity going on. Some, again, this is where we have that, I guess, difficult relationship is that, we're looking at state workers that are facing furlough days and possible reductions in work. And I think this is where Democrats, Tony and I were talking about, my personal opinion is you have to do everything possible. If you have a budget issue, and right now we have a $12 billion biennium shortfall, do whatever you need to do on that budget to do not hurt workers, because workers are what builds our economy, workers are what builds our communities, as Tony and I, as providers of public safety to communities, we know that strong communities and safe communities are based on a couple things. Obviously, infrastructure, which would be schools, public safety, good, obviously, access to recreation, and those things that we enjoy as middle-class Americans. And so, I know that there's some strategy. I know that, obviously, our state electeds are working through some strategy with their persons on the other side of the aisle. But it's pretty nerve-wracking, and it's pretty hard for us as labor. This is where we get really, really difficult conversations, is that, well, why would I support them when they're actually talking about furlough days and reductions in force? And those are difficult conversations that we're gonna continue to have and try to have conversations, and we're working on those angles with our state electeds. The other thing too, you know what, I didn't say it earlier, but you know, I'm a little bit more of a radical. I probably learned a little bit through some people I know. Maybe one of the guys over here on my left. But I think, you know, workers do have the power. And I think workers with community members even have more power. You know, when the TSA agents are being stripped of their ability to unionize, you know what, they can fix that in one day. Right? But it's going to take a radical movement, and it's going to take an aggressive movement. And yeah, you know what, it'd probably get a little bloody. But if we're going to change what's going on in our country, that's what it's probably going to take. And until workers decide that, you know what, a little discomfort is going to create more comfort down the road, we're really facing an uphill battle here. And I don't say that lightly, but I firmly believe a wildcat strike would fix a lot of the issues that we're seeing right now. If all workers walked out and they held their power, if they held their work, they hold the power. If we shut this country down for a day, 2 days, a week, yeah, it's gonna get some notice. And when you have these essential services like TSA agents, when you have government workers, Social Security, you know what, all NEA, let's talk about not the NEA, the Department of Education.
Air traffic controllers.
We have an ability, right? And it's got to come back to that, you know what, we need to take back the power. Whether you voted or not, that's two different things, but we do have the ability to take back the power. And for me, those are the things that I'm still trying to figure out and align with. And that power is not just the normal blue-collar workers that we think of. This is all workers. If 91% of our workforce is not unionized, I want to bring them with me, right? It is no longer acceptable to push people aside, right? Labor has a long history of pushing people aside, and it's not all pretty. And in fact, probably most people couldn't even name who the Department of Labor building is named after, right? Because it's a figure that they don't teach in schools anymore. It's somebody that they don't talk about. To be honest with you, it's an amazing, brilliant woman whose name is on the top of the AFL building. Yeah, Frances Perkins. But most people wouldn't know that. Under the Roosevelt administration, she was brilliant, and you know what? Her name sits there for a reason. I will tell you, I was in DC a week ago. The AFL building was quiet as a church mouse. Ooh. Right? And I'm not so sure why. You know, I will tell you that they should be as vocal and as busy and more busy than Tony and I here tonight. Like, look, to me, the AFL right now needs to rise up, needs to challenge people, needs to be engaged, needs to find ways that we rally and organize, and then keep the movement moving forward, because we know that strong unions and strong workforces create strong communities, and those are the things that we're going to have to do if we're going to change the course of what we're seeing today. And that is going to be radical, and I know some people are going to be uncomfortable, and I know that, you know what, the current administration is going to try to say that those crazy liberals and lefts, right, because poor Tesla, right, look what you've all done to poor Elon Musk. I mean, that poor guy is just really suffering. I don't know how he does it. I mean, he lost 100 billion? I feel terrible for him. But those are things that, you know what, we cannot continue to, you know what, support. And, you know, they're trying to turn that, right? The narrative that they're using, such as, oh, you know, the left loved Elon before he became right. No, that's not true. You know what? I think the left understands that there's a climate issue. The left understands that there's climate change that's impacting, and that's why we're having wildfires 365 days a year. You know what? Climate is actually part of the immigration issue, as you all know, right? Climate and immigration are clearly related, and people don't want to talk about that, but we need to find ways to have that conversation. And until we can have those conversations, Some people are just gonna continue to create their own narrative. But being radical is something that I think we're coming to. I'm no young person. Like Tony said, I was towards the top, not the bottom of our workforce, but I feel pretty young and I'm ready to go. So bring it.
People should feel too sorry for Elon. He just gave $100 million to Trump for him.
Yeah. Another 100 million.
After Trump went on for the White House selling his Tesla.
Yeah, there was a meme, not to get too crazy, but there was a meme of the Thelma and Louise, I couldn't have predicted, it could have happened, I don't know, I would have been nice, but if there was a cliff right there you can't even, by the way, you can't even get to your White House, you can't even access anymore. If you go to the White House today, they have put a fortress up around. When I first started going to DC, you could drive Pennsylvania Avenue. Well, now you can't get within 2 blocks of Pennsylvania Avenue on either side. So your White House is not, it's a fortress, and you can't get near it, just so you're aware.
Elon Musk is a dual citizen, Canadian and US, and 6 of his 14 children live in Canada.
But he's from South Africa. He lived in South Africa
Yeah.
after
His
Canada.
mother was South African. His mother's Canadian, father was South African.
And she purposely got citizenship in Canada for him.
Right.
Yes.
And if you have enough money,
And
you
his
can
kids.
citizenship anywhere you want.
That's true. Well, and for $5 million, you can have a gold card.
If we can deport them from both, from all of North America, that'd be nice, yeah.
I digress there.
Okay, anybody have any questions?
Hi, my name's Alan. Has the union addressed the issue of healthcare? If we had national healthcare, then the union wouldn't have to be so expensive to whatever entity that they're working with. I've heard a recent interview, I can't remember his name, but he came from, he was authored a book, and he said that GM may file a bankruptcy just to get out from underneath the healthcare costs. And I just wanted to know if maybe you, or as union reps, had thought about that, or had anybody approach you on that?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, look, healthcare is a crisis. In 2008, when the Affordable Care Act was passed, right, there was two major bills that year that really would have impacted working families and labor. One would have been a national collective bargaining bill, which unfortunately Ted Kennedy passed that year and missed a vote for the national collective bargaining bill. But they did manage to pass the Affordable Care Act, which, my personal opinion is the Affordable Care Act was a beginning, right? It was a beginning to a nationwide healthcare plan that provided healthcare for people, affordable healthcare for people who previously did not have it or were in very, very expensive programs. I think the unions clearly, if you could go back in time, clearly, obviously, we would create, one union, right, in which all of those benefits like healthcare would be under one umbrella. There's no doubt that public health care, we can talk about public banking as well while we're at it, 2 things which would greatly change the course of this country and nation. But right now the unions, I would say, are not necessarily in communication or cooperation with each other. We've seen, obviously, since last summer, maybe even some further separation, to be quite honest with you, and some negativity there, specifically with Sean O'Brien and his speech at the RNC. Now, I'm not going to sit here and bang on Sean O'Brien at the RNC. I think what he said was okay. I think what he says, we're not beholden to any candidate, but I think his timing was poor, and I think what he was attempting to do was not necessarily what I would say was the best for labor. But I think his message, if you listen to the 17 minutes, he definitely had a point. But to your question, no, right now I would say unions are not talking directly with each other about creating a nationwide healthcare plan. And I'll tell you too, it would be very difficult, even in this state, is that we have 112 locals, just firefighter locals, and out of the 112 locals, there's probably 6 to 8 different healthcare plans.
and they're individually bargained with the individual employers. We're not state firefighters, we don't work for the state. But that would probably be the start, is obviously union members in the state of Washington, obviously creating and then moving that forward. You know, probably West Coast, but even that, trying to do that through the different state programs. It's a, go ahead, Rich, I'll let you, you're an expert, so. Go on.
Yeah,
Here, Phil Donahue, right back at you.
if you look at the back of my shirt, it says healthcare is a human right. A lot of people don't know that that's the official policy of the United States of America. In 1948, we and 47 other nations ratified the UN Charter on Human Rights, and national health care was one of them, or healthcare as a right was one of them. We've never, ever honored that promise. Now, I bet you most politicians in DC don't know about that. So we have to educate them. Your point is right on. So we're not talking about, now I'm in the ILWU retired. I'm retired longshoreman. Great health care. Medicare, and what Medicare doesn't pick up, my union picks up. I pay this much deductible, this much copay, this much nothing, okay? Pretty lucky. If they found a way to take ships back to Idaho, I wouldn't have what I have. So I'm unique, we're unique because we're strengthened by our geography, but not everybody has that. And I think that is the issue that labor has to get behind. If labor didn't, and our politicians did, on both sides of the aisle. We have one person in the state that's a real champion of healthcare, but she's down in the 7th district. You haven't got the other ones. The other ones are, they get money from the, I call it the medical profits industry. So I think what we need to do is to touch people on both sides of the aisle, our neighbors walking down the street, and personalize things. When you hear about somebody's kid who had an operation and doesn't know if you're going to be able to afford it or not, touch them. Say, yeah, I understand what that means. But if we just keep attacking my little bit of the turf, my little bit of the turf is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller, and what Reverend Nehemiah said is going to come to pass in one way or the other. So labor has to be the champion of the working class. The champion of the working class. I think, and I'll just end with this, we have to take the position that all jobs are inviolate. I know that the environmental movement, and I consider myself part of that, but I'm also part of the working class. And when people work in industries that are considered dirty, but those jobs are inexpendable. We have to create a mechanism where we can retrain those people and send them into new jobs with similar hours, wages, and working conditions. We just can't throw people's livelihoods away. It's not what we're about. We wouldn't do that to our, one another. So when we go into this, I just think that we got to pick a couple things that we can get behind. My uncle used to say the working class is like a mighty river, but allows itself to be diverted into little rivulets and loses its power. I also do a song.
Does it work? I didn't expect to come and talk about healthcare, but I'm going to have to. I'm Paul Burns. I've only lived here for almost 2 years, but I was a 39-year veteran family physician in Kirkland. And I've had all kinds of leadership positions, and I've pretty much had it up to here with trying to change healthcare from the top. It's never going to work. They've been trying to do the same thing for 45 years, and I tried lots of solutions, not a single one of which worked. So just to let people know, now I'm one of the 3 founders of the Healthcare Reinvention Collaborative, which has only been around for 13 months. There's also a Primary Care for All Americans initiative from Rhode Island that's only been around for 13 months. They've estimated that every community could buy primary care on its own for $60 per person per month.
Wow, wonderful. Sounds good.
Can you imagine that? So right now, instead, you have to get it through your employer or the government, and there's 17 middlemen in between you and the payment. 27% of the healthcare budget goes to the providers. 27% of the healthcare budget goes to the providers. Your hospital district's looking for money because they need it. And primary care access, 4 years ago, when I was still practicing, you could get in and see me as a primary care doc same day or next day. You could get in 2 weeks or less for a physical exam. I'm still a patient down there in Kirkland in my own practice. It's now 12 weeks to get in. 70,000 doctors stopped practicing during the pandemic. And more nurses, a lot more nurses. And I don't know about you union guys, but you may have noticed your wages have been restricted by all the money that goes to healthcare. I'm on Social Security now too, and my payment goes down every year because more of the money goes into Medicare than comes back on the 3.2% cost of living increase is more than eaten up by Medicare. And I'm a lucky guy. I've been a doctor. I've made a good income. I've got a 401k and all that, which by the way just dropped a bunch. And I'm privileged, like a lot of people, but not everybody is. And half of this country is one accident away from bankruptcy. And 70% of the people bankrupted by healthcare have insurance.
Wow.
70% of the people who are bankrupted by healthcare have insurance. And up there in Whatcom County, we have probably the second most expensive hospital in the state. Children's Hospital is the first. Every state where the children's hospital is the most expensive. And, maybe that's because it has to be, because they will take all comers. So they have a whole lot of people there who aren't paying a dime because they don't have any insurance, and their kids. And they're gonna chop Medicaid now. And where's the Medicaid dollar go? Well, 50% of every child in Washington State is on Medicaid.
Wow.
And most of your mothers in nursing homes are on Medicaid. So most of that money goes to children, elderly, and disabled. And then one last comment, the ACA allowed Medicaid expansion in multiple states. That dies at the end of this year unless Congress acts to extend it. Ain't gonna happen. And that's gonna cost the state of Washington $1.9 billion in loss that will or will not be made up by the state. I would suggest it will not, but I'll try to bring that up with Representative Rammel and the other two at their meeting on Saturday, because I think I want to go to that too.
Thank you. Definitely like to connect with you after and keep building that network. One of the things that came up that I was thinking that I think I heard in the crowd somebody's on the school board.
Yeah.
I may just sound pessimistic, but there's a reason why kids don't learn about labor in school. I actually learned that from your partner. There's a reason. We all know the reason, right? I'm not being paranoid here. So when you're talking about healthcare, when you're talking about the power that workers actually have, right? If we started teaching a little bit of that,
civics,
if that got back, into communities and let them know, I have 4 kids. 2 of them are adult age now. 2 of them are just about teenagers. They definitely act like teenagers. Age-wise, they're not there quite yet. I bring my young kids to everything. We marched with the farm workers. Dad, what are we doing here? Do you know, and I explained to him, and I don't sugarcoat it. I said, do you know that farm workers in Whatcom County died because of heat? Because they weren't allowed breaks? You know that they were given shopping bags to go to the bathroom in? And I don't mean to shock them, but I need them to know that we're out there fighting for these things. We go to SEIU rally. I told them the same story I told you. I brought them down to the Harry Bridges Center for a dinner, and I'm exposing them to that. How many families are doing that? right? So just consider that. How do we get that back into our communities? How do we encourage just a little bit of education about the real history? I seriously doubt there's any high schoolers out there reading A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. If you haven't read that one, pick it up.
Mandatory.
Yeah. It's Howard Zinn. Zinn. A People's History of the United States. It's a very dense book. It's a story of the United States written by the people who didn't get a chance to tell the story. The Native Americans, everybody who built this country, the actual workers, and a lot of history of working people in there. Nobody in school is learning that. So can I get that 91% to talk about health issues? Got to start educating them about their power. And I got to start educating them younger so we can start growing people who understand that they have power. My 21-year-old thinks that getting a $20 an hour job is making it. And he doesn't know what healthcare is yet because he's still under my healthcare. He does. Well, he's in college right now, and that was our deal. But right, like you're in a union home, bud. $20 an hour. Let's see how far that goes in rent. We got to educate those kids.
Are there any other questions or, hold on.
I actually have one. Going back to the Janus decision by the Supreme Court, didn't that overturn like a 40-year precedent? Wasn't that what happened there?
I don't remember the exact age.
Yeah,
of
but
that.
I mean, there was already something on the books and that flipped it, and it had been around for a while. My question, when you were talking about like the 10% that's left in unions now, was there a huge drop after that? Because that was going to kill a lot of unions. That was the point of it.
Yeah, that was the threat. I mean, so I'm trying to connect, for whatever reason, I'm just losing it. So there was actually one before, I'm trying to remember before Janus, it was.
There was actually
a case though within 2 years though of Janus. Anyway, Judge Scalia though happened to die, which changed the vote of the Supreme Court, which it went away, and then Mark Janus obviously proceeded to take this up. We actually did not, and in fact, actually public employees were fearful of that, but what it did there is it actually reinvigorated members wanting to be, specifically obviously this only applies to public sector unions, and so, if you look at public sector unions, I mean, this is why this current administration is coming so aggressively at federal workers. It's the beginning, right? That's, in their minds, this is Project 2025 said it, right? It said that federal workers unionizing, that was one of their first goals, was to strip them of that ability to do that. And it's just the beginning, to be quite honest. If they can get the federal unions gone, that will be the next step to going after federal, or public. And so, public sector unions clearly, a lot of those organizations that we work for have federal grants, right, that are federally funded in some capacity, and that's going to be his avenue. His avenue is that he's going to try to figure out a way to strip, if you don't do if you don't kiss the ring, essentially, I'm going to strip you of those federal dollars. I mean, they just saw this in DC with obviously Black Lives Matter, street, right? Either take away Black Lives Matter street, or take away, I think it was, I can't remember how much money, it was quite a bit of money. Again, it made no sense other than to punch people in the face is all it really was. It was his attempt to actually just kind of show his force. And they DC did it, right, based on that. So those are things that we'll continue to watch. But we do opt in. Again, we have not seen dramatic changes. We, as a union, the International Association of Firefighters, we're a different beast, clearly, because as firefighters, we don't do organizing, right? We just really don't do a lot of organizing. Our organizations is pretty simplistic compared to other unions that do actually do active organizing. So Tony and I don't do a lot of that. There is some, I will say that we've changed our direction quite a bit. If you go back to the early 90s, private ambulance corporations were a rival that we, where at that point we're somewhat in competition. We've actually started organizing them, to be quite honest with you. Now there's limitations there. In British Columbia, for example, EMS or emergency medical services are provincial. and they're not allowed, but, you know, if you go into Calgary and to the prairies there, then it's different. So each province has different rules. You know, the states have a little bit different. The largest actual IFF local in Montana is a private sector. It's a private sector wildfire organization, believe it or not. So we're seeing changes, we're seeing transitions, we're definitely seeing organization, and like I said, we're about 350,000 members as of today, which is small, comparatively speaking. But we're not the smallest. You know, I just came back, one of the strongest labor groups that I had no idea about was the elevator construction guys. Believe it or not, nobody wants a non-union elevator construction person.
We don't want a non-union.
No, yeah, I had no idea. There's only like 30,000 of them, but they definitely have, yeah, that's a good union to work for. If you have kids growing up, you know, that's the other thing too. I think parents need to start talking about that, right? You know, going to college is great. Like I went to college, I had no idea what the hell I wanted to do, right? And I knew I kind of wanted to do healthcare, but I wasn't sure how. And I definitely found out you had to study. So then I became a firefighter. So, you know, which allowed me to do healthcare. Sorry, not trying to worry you or scare you, but you know, those are things that we have to really promote within our kids, right, and in our schools, right? Trades are good. Trade unions are good. Trades of any kind are good. You just heard Rich talk about some of the benefits that the ILWU has worked so hard over the years to have. I feel very fortunate. I heard the word privilege earlier. I'm privileged, right, as a white male that lives in a community that has always supported me. My parents have been married 67 years, right? I've been very lucky, and I don't take that for granted. It would be very easy, right, to go just do my own thing in retirement, but that's not what we are as a community. And you know, Rich talked about healthcare being, you know, a human right. You know, unions are about human rights. You know, if you don't think about anything else when you leave here tonight, just remember that unions are about human rights, and it's about human decency. It's about people having dignity. Dignity while they're working and dignity when they retire. You know, from birth to the grave, they should be able to have those things. We shouldn't have to worry about, in a country that's as wealthy as this one, nobody should have to worry about food on their plate. Nobody should have to worry about a roof over their head. And it's just absolutely asinine to me that we continue to struggle with the same things and fight each other over the crumbs with these 1%ers that want it all. So.
You can see why I invited them. One of the things about the Janus decision too that I think is what I'm encouraged by again currently with this is that I'm hopeful that if you put enough pressure on the American citizens that they're going to do the only thing that they can do, and that's to organize, right? Because the thing is that when somebody says that you can opt out, a lot of my membership looks at that as like our culture is when you see somebody open the dishwasher to empty it, there's people standing up to go and help out, right? You don't sit on your butt. When it's time to go out and look at the rigs, everybody goes out and looks at the rigs, make sure everything is in, right? So when I say, so you want to stop paying union dues, but I still have the obligation to represent you. It's called duty of fair representation, right? Most of my membership goes, I don't want to be a freeloader. I might not show up to the meetings, but I'm definitely going to keep paying my dues. I didn't learn this right off, but it really surprised me being the president of the Central Labor Council. I'm learning all the other houses of labor. I don't know if everybody knows this in the room. I didn't know it. Construction workers, they're only getting paid when they're building something.
Right, yeah.
Okay? Kind of blew my mind because I get paid just my normal salary, right? They don't have those luxuries. So when somebody's trying to make ends meet and they go, well, I could do the union job, or this non-union place has got some work, right? Some of those are the things that I'm concerned with. And it's not just the Janus decision, it's just looking at people need to make ends meet. And the other part to it is, if we lose our bargaining rights, yes, we will, I think we'll see that pressure cooker go off, but it's a long hill back to the top. If I can't bargain for my wages, hours, and working conditions, I mean, one of the biggest things, you see OSHA go away, you see L&I go away.
Yeah.
right? Workplace safety, we're gonna bring kids back to work too,
Yes, and some states are already doing that.
right? You push, I think you push enough and it's gonna go back the other way, and I
Quickly.
don't wanna go through that, but I think that's somewhere where we're going.
And I think to add, I heard Arkansas, look, don't make no mistake about it, probably the most repressive state right now that I'd be the most fearful of is Idaho, right?
Oh,
Like,
yeah, on our border.
yeah, I mean, when we talk about the South being terrible, you wanna talk about repressive, if you're a woman, I don't know why any woman would stay in the state of Idaho at this point, to be quite honest with you. It is going to become, and is becoming, and has become, probably one of the most repressive states in the 50.
Handmaid's Tale.
I grew up in a International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Union family, and my son is one of the last kids here that grew up in Anacortes that was in the firefighter program through Skagit that was sponsored, and he got a lot of his school paid for, and 25 years later he is in East Pierce County Fire and Rescue, and he's a lieutenant, and he's the medical services officer. And so I'm very much pro-union, and what can we do with everything that you've shared with us tonight? How can we support you when these things come up? Do you have like a webpage or something where we can look at it and say, okay, we're having a rally for union stuff in Mount Vernon on such and such a day, or what, so that we can come and help support you?
So I appreciate the question, and I'll go back to what I said, or one of the things that I said a little bit earlier was my view in being in the leadership of the Central Labor Council. To give a little bit more context, the Central Labor Council is the area representation of the AFL-CIO. The AFL-CIO is the American Federation of Labor Congress of Industrial Organizations, the union of unions. But the Central Labor Council is the hub for the local politics, right? Now, my take on it, my executive board's take on it is, when we have conversations like this, that's when we start to really share the information that's going on, where we can really make the impacts. I'm all for rallies, I'm all for strike actions, I'm all for writing politicians and making phone calls and those types of things. But when and that was a great analogy, Rich, the river that runs into the tributaries, right? This room is full of activists. But if you're being an activist in your own direction and we're not working together, we're not communicating. The analogy that I give some of the leadership is that I said there's 300 members in my local. I'm not gonna change a thing with those 300 people by sending them an email or a Facebook post. I have got to get with them and chat. So we have website, we're up on Facebook, all that type of stuff, but I think the biggest thing for me is I welcome just personal conversations and genuinely representation from this group can come to my Central Labor Council and just listen to the stories and share some of your stories. That's where I think the power is, right?
As far as to answer, to be specific on your question though, anybody I think can sign up for it. So the Washington State Labor Council puts out a daily newspaper called The Stand. And I would say that right now for the state of Washington might give you the most updated on a daily basis. It also talks about those rallies. It talks about obviously when they're doing town halls. It also talks about worker actions that are happening, who's on strike, who's not. Clearly, Starbucks big walkout yesterday. I think, how many stores was it yesterday? It was numerous stores. Obviously there was arrests. I mean, again, militant protest to fight for dignity in the workplace. And if young workers are willing to walk out of a job, I just came back from a program in which 2 members of the program were from Australia. All fast food, retail, and warehouse workers in Australia and Tasmania are organized, right? So if it can happen in Australia, granted, different population, I get it. Is it easy work? No. Is it hard work? Absolutely. But it can be done. And I think when we talk about the fight for 15, and we read about the fight for 15, and we're way beyond 15 now, right? That's what happens when people put their heads together and actually find good solutions to helping people have dignity in the workplace. But the stand is definitely a good one, and you can sign up for it right on the Washington State Labor Council webpage. And I think that will help as far as getting you going, as far as getting on and they'll send you an email every day. So it's a good one to sign up for. So, and kudos for your son too. That's awesome. It's good to hear.
Another one is the Northwest Labor Press. Northwest Labor Press. It's one of the oldest regional labor news outlets. They'll give you more of a regional view of what's going on in Pacific Northwest as in states area.
Are there any other questions? Oh, okay. Just
Well, I would like to say before we're done here that I very much appreciate the invite here to speak with you tonight. I very much appreciate your time in coming here. Whenever I see an assembled group for a reason, I know that there's other things that you might want to be doing other than this. So, sometimes for me, I wish that we weren't fighting some of these fights so that I could be home. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
But thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate it, and really thank you for all you're doing for the labor movement. It's so important, so much appreciated. And thank everybody for coming. I'm going to ask folks to take the chairs and put them away. But thank you all for coming. And okay, there's.
I wonder if I can say something real quick.
Okay. Okay.
You like a sign?
I just wanted to say one thing real quick. My name's Mike Hall. Last year I went to Earth Day. They had a celebration on Commercial Street. The thing is, this next Earth Day, I mean, we were all there, right? We buried in combustion engine in 1970 in Interlake High School. Even though I've only been a member of this organization for an hour and a half, I would like to stand at the Earth Day, if they're having one this year, with a sign that says Fidalgo Democrats for Climate. And I'm just going to stand there, and if anybody wants to be there, you can be there with me. You see, I wasn't sure if there was something. Last year I gave out Greta Thunberg books to the high schoolers that are there. And this would be a good way to introduce the Fidalgo Democrats and climate change to younger people. And thank you for letting me use your microphone.
Yeah, you will.